Welcome. You're listening to Practically Happy.
Are we recording?
We are recording.
Hello! Just kidding.
Out of the gate.
Hello.
Greetings and welcome to another episode of Practically Happy, where we once again have a guest on the podcast.
Three in a row. We said season 2 was going to be guest heavy, and we are delivering upon that.
Tis the season
Tis
of
the season.
artist guests.
Yes.
I will introduce our guest for this episode.
Do so.
We have Maria Dimanshtein here on the podcast today. She's a visual artist, graphic designer, and poet, and beautiful soul that I am so excited to welcome onto the podcast. Maria
Did you slip on the accent there, poet?
She is a poet and a beautiful soul that I am so excited to welcome onto the podcast. Maria and I met under funny circumstances. At first, she was just kind of this mysterious woman that lived in the same building that I lived in. And I would see her from time to time. Little did I know that over the course of a couple of years, she would become one of my closest friends and artistic living confidants. Her work is touching, ethereal, and thought-provoking, and so incredibly human, much like herself. Welcome to the podcast, Maria.
Thank you, Abby, for such a nice introduction. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to see where this goes today.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself to start?
Sure. As we were saying, I thought I would start with saying a little bit about where I'm from. So the mystery of my accent is revealed, even though I don't think I have an accent anymore. I know I do. And people ask me about it all the time. But I was born and raised in Latvia, and I immigrated to the Chicago area in 1998 with my family, with my parents and my brother. And since then, I've lived in Chicago, and I've actually lived in New York for 7 years, and now I'm back in Chicago.
Maria came to visit this weekend for spring break, which was an art show that we saw yesterday, and agreed to be on the podcast with us today during her precious time back in New York City.
Do you want to introduce the art show again?
About that? It was spring break. It's taking place in Manhattan currently. There's a bunch of good art.
The reason it's called spring break and it's happening in September, which sounds kind of funny, but it used to happen during spring break in March, but it got moved. So now it's spring break art show that takes place in the fall, ironically. But we went there yesterday with Abby and saw some interesting art. Spring break shows very provocative, innovative, cutting edge work from a variety of artists in different phases of their careers. And it's, if you want to see something that is really fresh and interesting, kind of unusual, I would recommend this art fair. It usually takes place it takes place at a different location every year, and they scout the location and find, for example, an office space that is about to be renovated, and it's donated to the fair, and the fair takes place in this alternative space. It's not a white cube or white wall type of environment.
It was like almost pre-demo. They were like electric wires coming out of the walls and stuff that the artists, a lot of the artists or some of them had incorporated into their like set design for the...
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was kind of...
Like pre-Spirit Halloween vibes.
And the other thing they were allowed to do with the space, because it's going to be renoed, is like paint and manipulate the walls and surfaces. Mm-hmm. So there was all kinds of like different carpets and murals and things that you don't see in your average like art gallery.
Just like incorporated with the space itself.
Yeah,
just because it was going to be demolished anyways. So
there was this one group of artists that like created a cave out of their little. It was a cubicle, but they made it into a.
Oh, I love that
gallery. It was like cave art that they had done with oil pastel on paper, but they made it into like something that looked like cave art.
That's cool as fuck.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Was there anything that you saw there that was of note? I assume all of it was of note because of how it sounds.
Of cutout art, and maybe that was our cognitive bias because Maria has been doing a lot of cutouts lately.
And by cutout, what you mean is that I work with paintings that are shaped, irregularly shaped. They're not rectangular. I create these shapes that I put together in a composition, and I paint them. And they all feature my texts because I work with text. Text is the main feature of my visual work. And I was paying attention to other paintings that were irregularly shaped for that reason.
Can you tell us how you started incorporating text into your artwork?
Yeah, so I was living in New York at the time, and I randomly took this workshop that taught how to write kind of stream of consciousness in a poetic way, how to let the poetry flow out of you. It was by no means a formal class, like it wasn't teaching you formal poetry like a university class would or anything like this. It was a workshop. It was a 4-day workshop that interestingly took place at 6 a.m. I think it might have been 4 days in a row, but like we met at 6 a.m. in Brooklyn. And we did some warm-up exercises and mindfulness exercises to pay attention to our environment and our bodies. It was led by this poet who is also an artist. And then we wrote, and I had already been journaling before then. But then ever since then, I started journaling in a way that was poetic. Like it wasn't literal, saying things like, oh, I feel this way and these are my thoughts and emotions. But it was more like observational and kind of streaming poetic writing. And I started, instead of journaling like I did before, I started journaling this way. And then I noticed that there were phrases and parts that were interesting to me within this writing. And I started to extract them. And I thought, wait, why not use this in an artwork? And I started using these phrases in the format at the time that I used was a 6x6 black square square of paper. So I used these paper squares and white ink where I wrote in different ways, but always by hand, these phrases. Or sometimes they were very short. Like, for example, one said, "Last night I slept." I used to suffer from insomnia, so sleeping through the night was a big deal.
Can I share my favorite phrase?
Yeah.
From your...
Sure.
Maria has a book of these poems with the visuals to go with them.
Which hopefully we'll also hear some of your poetry.
Oh yes,
into this episode.
I would love to read some.
We will get around to that. But
my favorite Maria poem is, "I live in New York, but I move slowly."
Yeah,
I've heard that line. I've heard you say that line before.
I say it because
I didn't realize that was your line. Oh wow!
Yes.
I live in New York, but I move slowly. I am more and more empathizing with that as even the more recent months go on.
To me, it's like these moments where you're walking around in the city that literally moves so fast. It's like some of the paintings we were seeing yesterday where you could see the motion of the trees and the sky above you. That's kind of what it's like to move around in New York. Like everything around you is moving so fast. That's just the energy of it. It doesn't actually have to be the truth of it.
Yeah.
And then you don't always feel like you're at pace with that environment. Sometimes you're just going on a walk in your neighborhood, but you're in the city. You're in the city.
This is a random thought or share, but I always felt like I still had free time and I wanted to spend with other people, and other people would be like, "I'm so busy. Like I have this and that, and I can't meet. I can meet you 2 weeks from now." Like my friends would be saying that to me. I'm like, well, what is this? And like, why do I had a job, I had a studio practice, I was going to the gym, and I still had free time, and I wanted to hang out, and a lot of the time it was hard to find like people that also had free time or like wanted to just chill.
That brings me to something else I wanted to ask you about on the podcast, which is, how do you have a job and a studio practice? Asking for a friend.
Because even on this podcast, we've talked about the fact that we like are not staunchly against the 9 to 5 like structure or against like the standard structure, because it's like it's hard to balance those two things. So when someone does it effectively, it's surprising.
I remember you guys talked about it, and you brought up Big Magic,
which is right in front of us.
Yeah, the
Which
book
I am
that is
getting around to reading.
right here, and Elizabeth Gilbert talks about having a job for income and not mixing like your love and passion for the art, or not putting all this pressure on your art to also be a source of income, which is just what I intuitively went for when I moved to New York. I think I was 33 maybe at the time, and I just got out of grad school with my MFA, and I found a studio. So I was making art, and then I needed a job. So I started freelancing as a graphic designer, because that's my initial background. I have a bachelor's in graphic design, and I worked as a graphic designer ever since I graduated from college. So I was able to find temporary projects and temporary work doing graphic design. And that went on for a while. That went on for about 7 years, the whole time I lived in New York. And some projects were maybe 1 or 2 years long, which did feel like a full-time job. But I don't know. I feel like when you have this dedication and this passion for something that you love, the time is there. I think the time is always there. I mean, especially if you're not raising a family. That's my experience, so I can speak to that. I'm sure it's an entirely different story when you have other people dependent on you, but when you don't, you have your job. And like, I was into CrossFit for a while, so I would go to CrossFit and then go to my studio, and still there was time. I mean, I would get home pretty late and go to sleep and repeat it all over the next day.
You do make a sacrifice in some form,
but I
even
remember
if it's sleep.
I still got to sleep on time, but I remember just so much wanting to be at the studio. I was like, but I heard I came up with all these ideas today. Like, they have to be produced. I remember, as I'm talking about this, I'm remembering this more and more, how I felt like, okay, so I have these ideas, and if I don't make them, if I don't produce them, they're gonna disappear, and that is so sad. Like,
I have that anxiety constantly. Like,
see?
I have a shortcut like on my home screen directly to my notes app, purely because it's like, if I think of something, I am immediately anxious I'm gonna forget it in 5 minutes.
Yes, and then if these ideas don't get produced, like that's such a waste. That is so sad, because they came to me and they're precious. Like, I saw them as precious.
Yeah.
So like, I wanted to produce them. So I was like, I have to go to my studio and like bring this to life. And it made so much sense at the time.
I think that makes sense now.
And speaking of apps, the Note app,
yeah.
I used to write poetry in the Note app.
Oh, I still do.
Yeah, and that's funny. Like, I would be on the train going to work in the morning.
For some reason, the train it's like one of those liminal spaces, like the shower, where ideas just happen. Mm-hmm. The train is one of those spaces.
Yeah, it was definitely that for me. I would be like thinking my thoughts and being like, "This is so interesting," writing things down and.
There's the idea of like ideas being like forms of energy that are like concurrently like moving through people. And this is like, it has a lot of like spiritual backing in the fact that like when an idea is ready to be expressed, it's just kind of sent out, and it's on whoever wants to act upon it, that it actually like comes into the world and is perceived. Because there's so many examples throughout history of like people coming up with the same ideas at the same times
in different places. Yeah.
Like, not even in the arts. There's a lot of, in like music technology, there's a lot of times when like two companies have applied secretly for patents and things in like the audio world, and like later found out that they were doing the exact same thing in the same year.
But there's a lot of mystery around like ancient art that surrounds that, because similar varieties of iconography and symbolism appeared in like completely different continents around the same time in our history.
Well, I'm even thinking like, if
suddenly we're drawing triangles everywhere.
Well, I'm even thinking like,
what's up with that?
With the subway being like such a tightly packed group of people, all like kind of in this liminal space, what a better time for an entire mass of people to collect that energy all at the same time. And you just might be where that
The channel.
you're the one willing to channel it, because some other people are not thinking about how they can channel that energy into something to create.
Which brings me to, I have a book of poetry and drawings. It's called Expect the Beast, only the A is in parentheses, so it depends how you read it. Like if you skip the A, it's called Expect the Best. So it has this double title or double meaning, which I remember thinking like, you should think positive, just expect the best. and then like
What's
life
negative about the beast?
and then like bad things would happen, or like I would feel like, oh my God, like I feel like the beast. I don't feel like, things are happening in the best way. So like that's where the title came from. But the book consists of very short poems. They're usually 1 or 2 sentences long, and drawings, or these paintings that I created that already incorporate the little poems. So it's a sequence of just words on a page or words incorporated in a painting. And the way I think about that collection is that it's not about me and it's not for me. It's about living in New York, or like just living in a contemporary society. These thoughts, I'm sure, are not unique to me. So like when I was writing them and when I produced the book, I was like, this is for that. My hope was that the reader would see themselves in the poem, in the poetry, and relate. So like you were saying, like we're here on the train, and I have poems about the train.
Yeah.
And we all share these experiences, and like I just happen to be the one writing them down.
Yeah. Psychologically, like people do imprint themselves onto the things that they see, especially in like the art world. Because that's how you can only understand something through your own lens, even if it is a representation from someone else's lens.
Yes.
You can only understand it to the extent that you have experienced what is being expressed. So like when someone reads a poem about the train, they're not necessarily thinking of exactly your experience on the train. They're thinking of if they were in your shoes experiencing this and how they would react, and being and following along your train of thought through their own eyes.
Or just relativizing it onto their own different experience.
Oh, yeah.
This was something in art school that hit me so hard, which is like, even in language, even in plain English, if we have 2 completely fluent English speakers in a room, like the fact that you can't really express anything to anyone because you are the only one with your eyes and with your experience. So even like, so with painting, it's visual, but this is what hit me in critiques in art school, is that like I could have such a clear idea of what this painting is about, and it will never be seen that way. Like it will never, not once by another person.
Talked about that on the podcast before. Just like the expectation of like, do you see me? Do you understand me? And someone sitting there looking at what you made and just being like, I don't get it.
I see my childhood bedroom and I'm like, it's a bear. It's a bear.
It reminds me of a teddy bear I had. It's like, no.
Would you be so kind as to maybe read us one of your more recent longer form poems?
Yes. So I wanted to ask you, so I have the recent writing that I've been doing is longer, kind of like your standard type of writing. And let me just pull up
The standard type of writing. I was not aware that there was
I
a
don't even
standard.
know what that means. That has no meaning now that I hear it repeated back to me. Like more standard length, the way you would expect of a poem.
Got you. Okay. I'm not sure what that is either, but I'll accept that.
So I have a couple poems that I consider humorous. Maybe they're not. I'm not sure. and some sad ones. I thought I could read either one. Maybe I'll read this one. It kind of tells a little bit about my background, which is I think it's a very personal view of my childhood in growing up in the 80s and 90s, initially actually in the Soviet Union and then Latvia. But I'll just read the poem. It kind of paints it tells you about my view of how I saw my surroundings and myself, I guess. And you can let me know if it's funny or if you see it as humorous or not. It's called I Don't Want Any Knitted Socks. I never liked home-crafted things. I wanted clothes that had bright colors and smooth textures and were produced in a factory, not something my grandmother or mom made for me. I wanted things to be brand new, not made from deconstructed, disliked scarves or abandoned dresses. I wanted trendy, weathered jeans, so my jeans, purchased solid navy blue, were taken to be cooked by a local hustler, resulting in an odd marble-like wash. I wanted shiny leggings. Mine, made by another hustler, were not shiny or stretchy. Mom had to adjust them with her sewing machine because they weren't fitting right. Everything we owned was brown, navy, dark green, or maroon. It's like they haven't invented happy pigments in this country. Then, one day, Dad brought me from America pastel and neon-colored sweaters, a jeans skirt, stretchy leggings, and a striped purple and black dress. Those were real clothes, and I loved them. They made me feel like I was for real and not just part of a muted landscape. I still only want new things. I dislike used furniture, anything vintage or previously worn, or brown. My couch is emerald velvet with rose velvet pillows. I don't go to estate sales or Goodwills. I don't shop on Etsy. Give me things mass-produced in a factory. I want them to look like no human ever touched them before me.
Why am I not snapping? I liked this.
I also liked that.
Thanks.
I see the humor in it, but like in the same way that I think we've talked about absurdism and how absurdism is the humor of just living on this planet. And I think that fits with that like way more. Like it's funny just because like that's just like the human experience for like you. That's just sharing your experience, and it's inherently there's funny aspects to it. Mm-hmm. Also think it's a great advertisement for like Amazon. Get something that's never been touched before.
Yeah, I know. Maybe it's not the popular opinion, but well.
I mean, you very well justify your opinion with that.
Yeah,
so
actually,
I can't argue.
That's why I like this poem because it explains. Because sometimes I will just be like, no, I like new things, but this explains why.
You have a good ass reason.
It was funny. We were talking before, and she was like, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't share this poem on this podcast because you like old things." And I was like, "Yes."
It's like yes, we love an old thing here in the Bushwick area.
Yes,
but I grew up with new things. So
yeah,
makes sense.
It's something that you would like to experience more, and usually is the opposite of what you've already experienced. Makes sense.
I'm a big lover of used things, pre-loved things. I am on the opposite end of that spectrum.
Have you seen these people online? Well, I'm sure they do it in person too, you know, as people do things in person as well. But I've seen this only online, where they test old things in their apartment or things that have been previously owned for if they have spirits around them.
Ooh.
Have you seen this? Where,
in passing.
You know, you'll take an object and I don't know, I'm sure you could use like a Ouija board for this but they have these like devices that they can use to see if there's like spiritual former lives energy on the thing. That creeps me out. Then I think about the old things and I'm like, well, just because this was pre-loved at some point doesn't mean it was also...
Doesn't mean it was pre-loved.
Maybe it was preheated.
It might not have been loved at all.
Prehated.
Might not have been loved at all. Maybe that's why I have it now.
It was abandoned at some point, so it has trauma because we know that.
Oh, like furniture.
Oh boy, things have trauma too. Oh no.
No, things hold trauma. No, like shit left on like the street on like moving times, moving season. All the shit in Park Slope, like walk through Park Slope, and all the furniture's out on the sidewalk. Mm-hmm. There's definitely some pre-hated shit that's there.
Do you know artists that will take like vintage artwork, or not vintage artwork, but like artwork that's been made by another artist and then thrown away or given away?
I've been finding more and more of that.
They make art on top of that art.
Mm-hmm.
No, like that canvas, that like marbled the whatever, not behind the one Natalia made. I'm talking about we have a little easel in the corner of this room. And I've been finding more and more just discarded art on the sidewalk. And like that has some energy to it. Especially when it's like visually like cool. It's like, why did you...
You found this piece?
To be fair, I don't know where that piece came from. That's my partner's, but I think it was also found.
I like it.
But yeah, there is an interesting energy to what looks to be personalized or customized things, even if it's weathered by time, sort of customized. Like there's a certain wear on it. Like we have a desk over here that very clearly, because it's my partner's very old desk from, I think, childhood, where you can very clearly just see the time worn, which is like arms against the side of it. Seeing that on the side of the street, you see that, and there's a story there, and there's a history behind it, and you can't exactly tell whether or not it was good or bad.
So this is basically the content of most of Maria and I's conversation off podcast. But Maria has been in the art scene, or at least the New York art scene, for a lot longer than you and I.
Oh, yes.
So we like to talk about sort of the pitfalls and the challenges of being an artist in the city. But I wanted to ask you specifically, like, what is your... or what has been your favorite and least favorite things about being an artist?
So the least favorite has definitely been, as I told you before, Abby, has been self-promotion. Just the need to promote yourself, toot your own horn, kind of bring your work and your personal self in front of people. I am realizing I haven't, like, I thought I was doing that. But now that I'm learning more, I think I haven't done enough. Like, for example, what I'm learning now is such a thing as a studio visit is a tool to connect with people and promote yourself in a genuine way. And that kind of never occurred to me.
It was just like, oh, another artist is going to come and see my work and judge me.
But you can invite anyone to a studio visit without being too forward. It's not the same as asking them, oh, will you show my art? It's like, would you just come
I
would
look
like
at
to
my art?
share my art with you.
And that gives a lot of depth to it.
Yeah, and it's genuine. Like at this point, I am genuinely wanting to share my art with you. I think you would appreciate it, or like I respect you as a person. I would love for you to see it, and I think it's a great tool and not a tool, but like a way of sharing your work with people who might help you in the future in a very organic way.
And you found a way to do this and sort of maintain your foothold in the New York art scene being in Chicago, because you do a lot of online studio visits at this point.
I started doing online studio visits, which sounds like maybe it's not the most ideal way, but we've been doing so many things online.
People are used to it at this point.
We are used to it.
We're 4 years deep into the events.
Indeed. And we do all sorts of meetups, we do classes. I do breath work online.
Which is definitely its own whole world. Online wellness.
And I see plus both good and bad in it.
Yeah.
I mean, on one hand, like you can do things you wouldn't have done otherwise.
Right.
Definitely wouldn't have. Yeah. And on the other hand, people are more reluctant to go and meet in person because, well, why would I drive there when I can just like
it takes some of the
see
social.
you.
I had an artist residency in Italy, and I needed to learn Italian before going, because I kind of said I spoke a little bit more Italian than I did to get that residency.
You lie on the resume.
I spoke a little. I just didn't speak enough. Okay. So I needed to very quickly, once I got the acceptance, learn Italian. And I was looking for in-person classes because I thought there's no way I can learn Italian off a screen, right? We had the pandemic experience of trying to learn from
anything, just like not in person.
From the institution that we both attended during the pandemic. Anyway, so I was kind of averse to that, but I was shocked by there being like no in-person available options. Because it was so easy for these Italian teachers to be online from anywhere. So the classes I ended up taking were like from an Italian person in Italy that was teaching us Italian. You know, it was time zone weird, but it was like on Zoom. Anyway, but then I thought about how awful it is. Like that robbed me of an experience of learning Italian with people, the social bonds that I could have made from sitting in a classroom with others.
But was it still a classroom with other people, or was it?
Yeah, but I didn't keep it because like there was one person in Germany learning Italian.
Yeah, and it's really strange. Like you can't just like lean over and be like, hey, ha ha ha, I think this is funny. Like whisper something like to your neighbor. That's gone.
You miss like the development of like dialectics, like the thing that you only get by like learning it in the space that you're utilizing it. Like even within the English language, which is the only language I speak, so that's what I'm going to use as my example. State to state, region to region, even like overseas, the dialect of English changes massively, even within like tens of miles away from one another.
Yeah.
Just like how it's used is different from place to place. And yeah, when you learn on like a Zoom class, you're learning just like the fundamental usage.
No cap.
No, absolutely no cap.
But I agree. The expansion of the opportunities part of it is great.
Oh yes, we were talking. I was like, why did we start talking about
You got
online?
the worst so
Because
far. What's the best part of being?
Self-promotion, but like why is self-promotion something that you personally struggle with? I mean, I get the pressure of it. That's something I think every artist feels.
Interestingly, in my culture, when where the culture that I come from, modesty was one of the virtues. Like you are supposed to be modest, and that's the best way you can show up in the society. You don't you don't toot your own horn. You don't say I am the best. Pick me because I'm better than you. Never say that you're better than other people. That is like offensive. I mean, and culture has changed, right? But like when I left that culture, I was raised that way essentially.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a little bit different now because everyone looks to the West. But coming here and witnessing people saying like, "Oh, I'm better than everyone." I was appalled. I was like, "What? Wait, how can you say that?"
The main way to advertise yourself is just say like, "Yeah, I'm better though."
Yeah.
Even if you're
I'm
not, it's just like, yeah, just say it.
they like show up at a job interview, but even more than that, like in a social setting, people would be like, "Yeah, I'm the best." I'd be like, "What? Like, how can you say it? Someone else has to say that about you. You can't say it about yourself."
Reminds
Like,
me of the elf bit in
I
Little
was
Pharaoh's
just
Elf.
thinking that.
The world's best coffee.
Best coffee. And he was like, wow, this is the world's best coffee?
says who? Says I.
Says the player. There's like
This is disgusting.
yeah, it's coffee. Sure.
Yeah, so that is why one of the reasons why I felt so uncomfortable promoting myself. But going back to the question about like what is the best thing, that is certainly bringing something into the world that hasn't existed before, like something unique that just wasn't there, and then you created it, and now it exists as an object, as a physical, or I mean, sometimes a physical thing, or as an idea, like in the case of poetry, or as an experience, and just the mystery of its appearance from nothing to existence that came through you. Like I feel so honored and so special that like this idea was born through me, that I had something to do with creating this piece of art, and it was like gifted to me by something, by a power that I don't understand, wherever creativity comes from, whatever we think about that. And then I was able to kind of see the different parts that made the thing. Like sometimes I look at art. So I am a visual artist, and I look at art and I'll be like, what the hell? Like, how do artists do this? Like, what is this? Like, where's this coming from? That'll be like just the other day we were, and this artist was just telling a story about his art. Yeah, like there's this creature, and it was born, and then it got transformed, and in this drawing, and it's doing this, and like living its life. I'm like, what? Like,
Where did you get this?
Yeah, where's this coming from? And there's this whole world, and this pink creature is living in this world. Like this is so random, so weird, and many things feel the same way, especially things that are complex or odd or unusual. I'm like, how did this come to you? Even though like things come to me too, and sometimes I wonder like, how did I see like through to like know which parts to put together to create these things, but somehow like they there are obviously different processes involved, like different steps of the thing. That like when you have a vision and then you deconstruct the vision, then you kind of reconstruct it once you've produced the parts into like a physical whole. I'm talking about, I'm using the example of visual work, like visual art.
I think what you said could apply to any medium, though. That was
as you're saying
yeah.
this, like I said before about everything comes through the listener's or viewer's perspective. I'm thinking about this with like music and production stuff. And it tracks completely to a T. It's amazing how you can take like this. We said it in an earlier episode, like some anomaly, some like gray matter in your head, and somehow, as artists, we have just constructed processes to just make it exist. Matter is neither created nor destroyed, and yet I'm not going to say thought is matter, but now somehow it's something that someone else can consume, and it didn't exist before, and you brought it from here to something that can be observed.
You know what? That kind of makes sense because some art is just so random.
Yeah.
And thoughts can be that way too.
Oh, yeah.
So some art that we saw yesterday was like some giant soap.
Big soap.
Big soap. I was like,
I support big soap.
I support big soap. But it is kind of incredible to think about how like you
Someone woke up
you
and
had
thought
that vision.
big soap.
You deconstructed it.
Was there deconstruction or was it just big soap? Don't put any more pretension behind it.
Well, you had to go through the
Big
process
soap.
of how you were to display and create big soap.
Soap big. I guess there is a whole other how do you okay, never mind. Okay.
There were some steps in between.
There were steps. Was there a brand of soap or was it just big soap?
Dove.
Dove. Oh, it was Dove soap. Was it made of soap?
Plush.
Oh, it was plush soap. Not usable.
That is random.
Not
It's
usable.
random. I'm sorry. Whoever this artist is wonderful work. Pretty random. It's part of our divisive art crit series.
Oh yeah, we're getting a little divisive marker. Big soap, yes.
Pretty random.
Big soap, yes. Vintage
Oh.
clothing, no.
No.
Don't tell anyone. I don't want
No,
people
you're in
to know.
Bushwick right now. You're gonna have people come after you.
I know.
Once they hear the poem.
Once they hear the poem, it will make sense.
This is what we need in society, right? It's just like you need to hear the perspective and how the person got there, and that will heal the world.
And then we grab the pitchforks.
I like that. That makes sense, and it's a simple thought, but it's true.
Yeah.
We had a little bit of this on our last, our episode with Pants Pony, who was a guest artist on the podcast.
Yes,
talking about
absolutely.
conspiracy theorists and how if you listen to them, they're coming from somewhere. They're not coming from nowhere. They got to nowhere, but they started from somewhere.
They got to nowhere because they didn't have a trust in the somewhere that they had. Which is, again, just a point of perspective. So you can easily draw that parallel to like how artists just like come up with these ideas and just run with their thoughts. Whereas like the difference between an artist and a conspiracy theorist is an artist is trying to display something so that someone else could understand their perspective and while not entirely questioning the reality that exists within. They're welcoming someone into the space, not telling someone that the space that they exist in is a lie.
Some art makes you question reality.
Right.
Some does, but it's not.
Like The Matrix.
Or big soap.
Or big soap.
Making you question.
Maybe you're small and the soap is normal.
Where do you think the small soap comes from? It's chipped from the big soap.
There's one big soap somewhere in the world.
It's
and we're chipping all of the
it's like how
soap
all of our salt comes from like salt mines. There's the soap mine.
So it's not that
They
strange.
took the big soap from the soap mine. Just here's big soap. It's like big piece of marble. You know how some people whittle like sculptures out of soap, much like one would carve from a big block of marble. Big soap for big soap whittler. Big Soap Whittle is my favorite folk band from Minnesota.
That would be like easier. I'm not sure. Compared to like marble. Maybe we should do big soap sculptures. Okay, now I'm
See,
sold. Now
there
I'm
we
sold.
go.
I got there. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to ask you, kind of in the same vein, is like anything that you would share with young artists, whether they're starting out in New York or anywhere. You know, they're fighting up against this big, industry.
Sorry, you said big and it stopped.
And there's a lot of options out there, but there's also not a clear path. for young artists to pursue their passions?
Oh, it's path. It's the hardest question. I'm kind of grappling with it myself as I go through midlife and wondering whether my path is what I want to pursue, or what is my path, and like what is my passion, and which way I want to move.
So it never
from
ends.
here. I have to say, like one thing that came to mind recently was that like I kept thinking like, oh, if I was younger, I could take everything, like all the energy I have, and invest it into something I want to do. The thing that seems to me, I might be wrong, but like as a young artist, I think if you're able to gather all your passion and all your energy and channel it, gather it and point it at your goal, and just like kind of keep doing it, just keep doing the thing that you're doing in a focused way. And I feel like it's got to work out. Like whatever it is that you're doing, just keep at it. Like, consistency. Like it's going to work out just because you believe in it and because you're working at it or on it. It's gotta happen. And I think the world is interested in what young people have to say in general. Like if whatever your field is you want to break into, people want to hear what young people have to say, and like if you're persistent, like they will pay attention to you. I think just don't give up, and don't like kind of veer away. Just keep like kind of at it, like keep pushing like the thing that you want to do. No, I want to do it. I'll keep bringing it, keep showing it like to people, or like sometimes if there is adversity for sure, and people will like, sometimes you're discouraged and sometimes you're not seen, and that's hard, but like that's a phase. Just get over that and keep at it. I think it will work out. When you're younger, you have like all the energy. You're not like as concerned with like your far away future because you have time to figure things out. You don't have to worry about retirement in your 20s as much. Okay, you should. That's another thing I told Abby. I would say like that you should start it. Like
You're saying I have a chance?
I wish somebody would have like kind of told me. Like somebody probably told me, but in a way that I would have heard, start a retirement account in your 20s, put $100 away, and that will be like the money that will definitely pay off. Like it will be a huge amount like 50 years later. Like I just was unable to hear this in my 20s.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not financial literacy that people teach.
No.
We don't really get that unless
if you
we're
barely
lucky.
get taught financial literacy at all.
Yeah.
No, I had like no knowledge. And like my imagination just wasn't there. I was like what? Like I'm young. Like I don't have to save now. That will the future will never happen. What are you talking about?
Will never happen.
I want to argue with a point you were making previously. I'm sure you're still. So it's not denying your feelings. Like I'm sure you're still in this place where you're figuring your own passion and direction out. But from an outsider's perspective, looking into your life, like as an artist, the things that I aspire to do, you have accomplished. So you've had your gallery shows, you've written a book of poetry, you've done artist residencies, you've had your own studio practice for a really long time, and you've been not fighting but pushing it ever since. You submit those applications and you don't give up. So I think you've taken your own advice in a way that you don't see as you, but I see as someone who's watched you.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. Yes, certainly we can be very critical of ourselves, and I am that way too. I always think like I should have done more, or should have done things in a different way. Not so much should have, but like should be doing things, should be working harder. I don't know. I am. Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out.
I think as artists, like we end up being our biggest critics because we see ourselves in like the most granularity of anyone who's ever going to see either us or our work. I think this could be an
So
interesting.
hard.
This could be an interesting entire episode, realistically,
Yeah.
on how we view our own work and how we criticize our own work, and like imposter syndrome as a whole.
I was reading something recently where like artists used to be represented by institutions. So we're talking about like Europe, you know?
The institution of Europe.
No, when religion was bigger,
Oh, yeah.
even in tribal communities, like you used to be you used to be a channel for your religion, for God.
Art
for-
used to be only ever because of religion. You would artists would be hired by the church.
It wasn't just you, you know, it wasn't just all on you. You had
Right.
a purpose and you had a place in society and you had people commissioning you or wanting your work for a reason. So that is direction, that is career, that is something that we can, you know, solidify in our minds as a path, right? But where artists are now is just completely like it's just
You're on your own.
and if you don't have like the mental fortitude to consider yourself in high enough esteem to pursue your own passions, you're gonna end up in sad land.
We had on our mental health episode, I believe that was what, episode 5 and 6 or whatever it was, a while ago, we were talking about like what connects artists, and it wasn't necessarily like mental health or like do artists have to be sad or do artists have to be like X, Y, and Z,
Chicken egg.
chicken egg sort of thing. But you had brought in a paper that chalked it up to the only thing that could be found was motivation. That was not even necessarily to be like good at something. It's just the motivation to pursue what you are pursuing.
Yeah.
And that sounds like what you're saying, just like constantly just chipping away at this creative, I'm not even gonna say creative block, because creative block is a completely different thing, but this, your own big soap. You keep chipping away at the big soap.
Big soap. Find
Because
the big
like
soap.
there's nothing else that you see of higher value to do, but then to continue channeling this thing that you feel is important.
Absolutely. And it does accumulate.
Yeah.
You know, you go through, maybe you do little shows, maybe you meet someone here, someone there, 10 years later, that person has a gallery. You never know. You know, things will change over time. And it's like you have to be very patient, which is hard. But I do believe that like if you're growing and advancing, like you will get somewhere. You're putting energy in.
It's
And
discipline
effort
as well, yeah.
Yeah. I think for us, the hardest thing is patience and discipline, because it's completely self-motivated. Like no one's,
It has to be.
there's no line out the door saying like, I'll pay you money, just give me art. Like that's not happening.
Coming from the music world, no one is saying, I'll give
Oh
you
my
money.
God. One of the art pieces that we saw yesterday was a Sharpie on a piece of steel, and there were words, and it read, "I give you art, you give me $100," and that was the cost of the piece. So it was
I love
both
that.
a commentary and an actual,
I love that.
you know, price tag for.
I was helping my partner think of like pictures on how to sell like, because she's been working on like painting tote bags as of late. And I sent her that meme of that guy saying like, I give you tote bag, you give me $35. That's the same thing. To the point now we're making art so meta that it's talking about the fact that you won't spend money on art.
Because we want nice new things from Amazon. For me, even in IKEA, I see some of the art that IKEA sells for your walls, you know, and I'm like, who buys this? Do they know that real art
Some
exists?
people do. Some people do.
People do, absolutely.
They're there for a reason. The Strusselhagen, I'm sure that's actually like not even like one vowel off of an actual piece of something in IKEA.
Mjork.
Also probably pretty.
Choco-
Strusselhagen is probably too.
Choco Mjork.
Choco Mjork.
Yeah, it's dark chocolate. I know
Is
that
that
one.
actually what
Yeah,
it is?
I know that one.
Choco Mjork. Oh, is it like chocolate milk?
No, I think Mjork means dark, and I think it's dark chocolate.
Well,
it's just,
the stuff at IKEA isn't actually Swedish.
it's dark chocolate.
It's Swinglish.
It's a more of a bitter taste. That was our rant.
Vegan sopa.
Every episode we come up with a potential t-shirt design for the podcast. This one's definitely like some sort of whittling of soap.
Fiddling of
Giant soap.
big soap.
Big soap.
I support big soap. It's like the vote for Pedro, but except it's
support
I
big
support big soap.
So speaking of the connection, potentially or no connection between mental health
Oh God.
and the art world. Will you bless us with another one of your poems? Maybe a sad one?
Yes. I was thinking the same thing when you were talking about whether the artist needs to be sad or not. That is actually
need to be sad.
That is an interesting question, but somehow isn't like the state of like sadness or darkness like I don't know. It feels like it's imbued with something. Like or maybe I'm not. I'm not the right person to talk about different states of being because I'm more familiar with the darker states. Maybe I can't even I was going to say maybe the darker state is more interesting, or is it like
well, there's an argument to be made for that. There's entire genres of art that are based purely around that.
Part of the argument in this study was that a lot of artists present with manic symptoms as well. So there is art that comes from the more heavy side, and there's also art that comes from the more energized side. So it's hard to tell,
and sometimes combined.
I think what people love on looking at it from the outside in is the magic that we make from suffering of any kind.
Yeah, and you could call these states, maybe they are somewhat extraordinary, the feelings of deep darkness or mania, they bring something that you don't normally experience in your in the mundane realm. Well, I'd like to share another poem. It's called The Empty Universe. I was at Old Navy when I felt the trembling. The world moved away from me and got quiet. My heart got quiet too. No more stories or colors or worries. What is this? I thought. But I didn't know the unfamiliar emptiness inside of me and surrounding me. I got trapped in a glass tank that kept me away from the trees and the sunshine, from friends, dogs, paintings, chocolate, music, dancing. Nothing smelled, nothing sounded familiar. The tank inside of me contained dry air for nothing. Left to me was the entire universe devoid of things and life. The empty universe, as I call it. I floated like an astronaut without a spaceship, like a moon that was no one's. This is speaking of darker states.
Yeah. Is it too much to ask if that was about anxiety in any form?
It was about anxiety, yes.
Because it gave me my first time experiencing a really bad anxiety attack.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It comes across. It's just that I did not know that I could feel this way. I've felt depression wasn't exactly a super unknown thing to me the first time I had a really bad anxiety attack, but then suddenly it felt so in my body, to the point where just I'm not here anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an episode like that. And then it lingered, and that sensation or that mental landscape lingered with me for a while.
Yeah.
I think this is what I meant when I said that your work is so human, because I like the start of the poem. I was in an Old Navy. It's you're not some ethereal, abstract thing that I can't relate to,
I'm looking for a shiny new thing.
You're shopping.
Yes.
I've been there.
I like in one of the themes, or one of the things that my poetry is about, is this dichotomy of the mundane and the mysterious, which I think is just, both of these things or these aspects are part of our lives. The mundane is always there, waking up in the morning, brushing your teeth, going to work, making grocery shopping, very mundane things that. I find them grounding in a way, especially going to a store. Sometimes when I will be sitting at home, feeling lonely or feeling having existential thoughts, and then I'll go grocery shopping and be nah, here are bananas, here's milk, and
thinking about the weight of your existence while considering how expensive bananas have gotten in the past 3 years.
it's just like looking at things in 3D is grounding.
Yeah.
Like, to me, and it's like, okay, money, like vegetables, like breakfast, like that's definitely part of our daily lives. But then and then in the background there are these existential thoughts, and they kind of like intertwine and happen at the same time. And it's like, and it's kind of almost absurd that we have to live in this dichotomy every day, being like, but I'm gonna die, but like, okay, I have to make breakfast, or
I'm
like,
gonna die, but Cocoa Krispies are in my bowl.
yeah.
We're all gonna die, but someone made Big Soap. Sorry, I keep bringing up Big Soap. I'm enamored by Big Soap.
We've hit our Big Soap quota for the podcast. You're gonna
That's
have
fair.
to.
Okay, I'm gonna have to chill. I'm gonna have to chill on Big Soap. Yeah, I really liked that poem you just shared.
Thank you.
I really liked. Maybe it's wrong to say I really liked it, because to me it just made me remember the first time I experienced like an anxiety attack that like stopped my life for a moment. Yeah, it just really highlights the very human aspect of it.
We like that.
I feel seen by it.
It might be triggering, but we like that. We like being triggered by things that we relate to.
Yeah.
We like feeling like we're not the only one experiencing.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. I think like to me, like what I love, one of the things I love about reading poetry is that I'm like this poet is revealing such intimate moments about themselves, and sometimes they talk about their fears or like insecurities, or just like how their vulnerabilities. I'm like, oh my God, like other people feel what I feel too, or like you feel empathy for them, or you relate to them, and that's just like, it's almost like you're, they're not there, but like you're sharing this moment with them.
You have a friend for a moment.
Yeah, and visual art can do that too. I mean,
all arts can do that.
Yeah, oh God, music. Like I can't believe I'm talking to a musician, music. And I haven't brought up music yet, but music is actually so I as a visual artist and as a poet, it's absurd that I love music so much. Like it moves me to the core. The fact that it goes, it lasts through or goes on over a period of time. I can't even describe to you. Actually, here's an example of how music influenced my art. Last year, so I'm a huge fan of electronic music, like techno and house music.
Yep.
This is how Maria and I initially bonded as people
over techno, over house and techno.
Yeah,
all right.
and I find it to be transcendent. Like I have transcendent and divine experiences going to shows, and like listening to this music on big speakers. And last year, I went to ARC Music Festival in Chicago. It's a big electronic music festival.
Yep.
And I had such an amazing and beautiful transcendent experience that I promise I don't have a lot of stories. Like this might be the only one, but I did get like an inspiration for my visual work. I was done with the series and I was like, what am I gonna do next? I don't know. Like I was having a little bit of a crisis, being like, I don't even know if I can paint. I'm not a good painter. I don't know what I'm gonna do. And then I had this vision, like I could almost literally see the next thing I had to do while I was at the show. I myself am skeptical of stories like this, but like this is my only story when I had a vision or like something shifted in the moment. Because like when you read certain inspirational books or self-help books, or sometimes like books about psychology, they will be like, oh yeah, I had this client and then it was, they were a total wreck, and then they came to me and we did this exercise and then they immediately felt better, or something along those lines.
I told them to be happy and they were happy.
And then they were a changed person. Like you read so many of these stories, and I always feel like I wish I had a story like that. And like this is my only story that approaches something similar, where I had an inspiration strike me during a music show, and then I came home, and a few days later I created this art piece that became the beginning of a new series of work that I completed 10 pieces of that series now. Art, poetry, and music and other forms of art are... It just came to me. I just realized that I didn't mention music at all, which I don't know. I guess it's maybe too big to even put into words.
It's, in my opinion, of course, I'm biased. I do a lot of sound and music things, I've met some people who just like completely forget that music at the end of the day is a form of art and not just like something
Background.
that's just incorporated into your day-to-day life
yeah.
just because of
Oh
how
my God.
prevalent it is.
I try to convince people about visual art this way. So some people really don't think visual art matters. And I'm like, you would be walking through a completely blank world.
Yeah, it's just
It would be void of color and imagery if you did not have visual art.
you exist in a world that's just full of, I'm not even going to say oversaturation, because I think oversaturation diminishes the importance of having a world full of expression. But every minute of your day is surrounded by, in some form, someone's form of expression just being in your vicinity. And I think music is one of those that is, and also realistically visual art, is just always around you to the point where it almost just feels like it's part of the world you
Right.
live in. You're not
It's such a
seeking...
beautiful part of the world that we live in too. And it adds so much. And that's why it frustrates me to no end that art is not appreciated by
Or
your average.
compensated appropriately.
Well, the capitalistic structure has no place for it, basically.
Yeah.
So it's not valued by people and it's expected for free.
Despite being
Like
indisposable by those same people.
Listening to music and paying for it is like an absurd concept to some people, but you couldn't live without it. And those artists that made that music that you're enjoying, deserve something.
They're touring for
their
5
work.
years just to pay off the record
they
deal
shouldn't have to be
signed.
accountants, just to make
Yeah.
this music.
You want to know why half the artists you love that stop making music? They signed one bad deal that they would never be able to pay off until they quit. These are things that we find so mundane. And even as a person who works in sound and music, and I'm sure this goes for writing, I'm sure this goes for visual art, to the point where you sometimes forget how special it is that some people have this means of expression, how special it is that people just take it as part of their life, that it exists. Like, how weird is it that an artist can express something in whatever form they take, and someone consumes it almost by hazard of living?
I
That's
that
crazy.
As a statement. That was a good statement.
And then, of course, the artist gets paid a tenth of a penny. But that's fine.
I think this is actually a great segue into our next section, which listeners
section.
of the podcast will be familiar with.
Oh, yes.
So the tarot portion is a portion of the podcast where we use fancy divinatorial, is that a word?
Divinatory.
Divinatory cards to illuminate something about the artists that we have on the podcast and something about our trajectory as artists. This one will be for Maria Dimanshtein, our guest today. This is Practically Happy.
Did she mispronounce the name again?
I let people pronounce it however they want. I mean, it had all the right sounds in it.
We are Practically Happy, the podcast with Raser and Rhodes. That's our two co-hosts. That is our names.
Yes.
And
it
our
is.
guest is Maria Dimanshtein. And we're going to do a tarot portion in which we will divine some future things
Oh, I'm excited.
for our guest.
I can't wait. I want to know what my future holds.
Welcome back to the tarot portion of Practically Happy, the part where I talk a lot.
The podcast today, to address the room, not so much the elephant. The podcast today is coming to
So
you.
that's the frog in a pink hat in the room.
Is coming to you from Cole's apartment. If you watch our YouTube version of this podcast, which
You'll
is
notice
on
we're
YouTube,
back in a somewhat familiar but long not seen location, because now it's not so hot to the point where I am baking alive in this room.
And if you're ever wondering what these tarot card pulls look like, we usually throw up images on the videos that we post on YouTube, so you can see the spread of the cards.
So today, our reading is going to focus on Maria's future.
Her trajectory moving forward as an artist.
Would you like to add your intentions in the podcast? Is there anything you're hoping to hear? Is there anything that you're precautious of, questioning, or concerned with? What are your intentions coming into wanting to know your future?
I'm feeling pretty stuck, and I want to hear something that will like spark some sort of a inspiration for unstuckness.
Unstuckness. I love that.
All right. I can work with that. I would like you to split this deck in as many ways as you wish or feels necessary. Whatever way feels intuitively correct, I would like you to do so. From this pull here, I would like you to pull 3 cards of your choice toward you. Don't necessarily flip them over just yet. A first card has been pulled, a second card has been pulled, and a third card has been pulled. Interesting.
Interesting.
No, I was saying
exactly what I thought would
I
happen.
was saying interesting because they were all from the middle of the deck. And sometimes I feel like some people over intellectualize and like hunt for too long. I'm going to pull a fly just for myself.
Flies, as I understand them, are cards that appear sort of more by accident from the slip of the hand. We like to divine some meaning for ourselves from these cards that come up.
So the fly I just pulled for myself was a reverse Knight of Pentacles. We will get around to that. So Maria's reading is as follows. The 9 of Swords.
Ooh.
The 10 of Pentacles reversed.
Wow.
And the Hanged Man. With her shadow reading, her groundhog, being Justice. Which I peeked before while I asked you to cut the deck. As you did. I noticed Justice was the bottom card before you even cut the deck, as you picked them up, and it's fun that it was the bottom card again. So, give me a moment to dog-ear some pages in some literature, because I think it would be worthwhile to talk to you more about the individual meanings of this card, because as someone who works in literature and in poetry, there's a lot you can glean from general scriptures. Having a greater scripture to glean from can perhaps help a little bit more in discerning not only what I think your future will be, but how you can mold it.
Okay, sounds good.
Because I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly what your future is.
Oh, no.
I have no clue.
Oh, no.
But
somebody tell me. Tell me what to do.
Tarot is not a time teller. It's a reflective tool.
Okay.
I don't know. From my tarot readings, I've gotten some pretty good next step.
I'm saying that, but then
Yeah.
I've also had some crazy shit. So
Okay.
that's the precaution.
While Cole peruses, I'll do our shtick. We have a Patreon. We do. And you can support the podcast there. And we are practically happy on Patreon. We have an Instagram that you can follow. It's called Raser and Rhodes. That's RASERANDRHODES. And that's where you can keep up with the podcast. Feel free to like, subscribe, and comment wherever you're watching or listening. This helps us get going.
I will simply be reading to you the meanings of these cards, and then we will collectively see where it can take us. So first up in your reading is the 9 of Swords reversed, which can often be seen as a card of sorrow. The image of deepest sorrow, of utmost mental pain, where the queen frees herself by turning sorrow into wisdom, and the 3 suggests the calm of acceptance. The 9 shows the moment of agony, of disillusion. The swords do not stick in her back, but hang in the black air above her. Very often, the 9 refers not to something happening directly to us, but rather to someone we love. Love, in fact, fills the card and gives its meaning. The blanket design shows roses, symbols of passion, alternating with the signs of the zodiac. In the card's deepest sense, it shows a mind that takes on itself all of the sorrows of the world. Can we see a way out of such dreadful pain? Both Buddha and Christ depicted the world as a place of unending sorrow, yet both also said that tragedy remains always a half-truth, that the universe seen as a whole brings joy and peace. And Nietzsche wrote embracing existence so completely, with such total ecstatic honesty, that we would gladly repeat endlessly every moment of our lives, whatever the pain. Keeping in mind what you said earlier on in the podcast about the fact that you have to continue to chip away. Mm-hmm. And you have to continuously attempt the things you want to be doing. Mm-hmm. I think this card speaks to the fact that you are chipping away at something that has not yet yielded. And it is starting to make you feel like it is an unmoving object. You're a unstoppable force chipping away at an unchippable big soap. I tried so
your
hard.
last.
That's
It's
my
your
last.
last
That's my
soap.
last. But it can begin to make you feel like the efforts you're putting in and the ends of which you're moving toward are not worth as much chipping as you're putting forward, which can result in a moment of stuckness. However, that does not mean one should begin to draw away from that chip, because maybe this sounds like the gambler's mindset, but like 90% of gamblers give up before they hit big. But in the art world, there is a gamble you play with the fact that you're never going to be able to chip away at that block. You're never going to be able to break a writer's block. You're never going to be able to fully bring clarity to a creative idea if you're not actively poking at it. It will continue to remain some anomaly in your head that will never find a grounding that you can see an end to, even. Because when something's in your head, you're not exactly thinking about how it ends. And you're not going to make any progress on it unless you chip away at it. So the 10 of Pentacles comes after that in your median of sorts, which the 10 of Pentacles upright is, I would say, very positive. Yours is reversed. If the sense of boredom with life increases, it can lead to taking risks, especially financial or emotional ones. Sometimes, depending on the context or the projected results, the risks are justified. For instance, the Fool beside the 10 of Pentacles would urge the gamble. At other times, the risks come less from need than from impatience with what we already have. The situation becomes more pointed when the 10 of Pentacles appears with the 10 of Cups. The 10 of Pentacles is often compared to, in the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey.
I love the
Odysseus. Yeah, how Odysseus comes back, in a lot of ways the same person, but with a whole new perspective on their existence, and honestly looking different to the court that he's re-entering, to the point where they don't even realize it's him until he commits an act that could only affirm that it's him. How you come back to the world you're in will be evolved in a lot of ways. You are not at your end. You are not returning to a home you're familiar with. In breaking this block, you will almost have like another coming into your creativity to some extent. You're not returning back to form, you're evolving that form. To make a parallel to music, as we were talking about before, how an artist sometimes will make an album and then just disappear for a while and come back with something completely new, but not less compelling. They just have so much more experiences and so much more experience chipping away at this passionate block that they have, to the point where whatever comes next exists tangentially because of the person who made it, but does not even exist within the same world, and maybe doesn't even speak to the same experiences that previous art did. What I think is good to take from the 10 of Pentacles reversed in this reading is to make sure you're not stagnating as far as continuing to chip at the same exact block of marble, not big soap, same block of marble. Make sure you are, to use the material analogy, make sure you're experimenting with your material. Make sure you're not digging at the same exact experiences, maybe taking different perspectives on those experiences if it's truly what you need to express. What you may be chipping at right now is exhausted, and you need to come at it as a new person. So, your last card, and if we're going to see this as like past, present, future, you asked specifically about your future. And I don't necessarily read cards in a strict past, present, future tense, but this last card is what is colloquially known as the future card. In readings, the Hanged Man bears the message of independence. Like the Fool, which signified doing what you sensed was best, even if other people thought it foolish, the Hanged Man indicates being who you are, even if others think you have everything backwards. It symbolizes the feeling of being deeply connected to life and can mean a peace that comes after some difficult trial. To go directly off of what I said with the 10 of Pentacles, you do have to find a new, not even a new way to be yourself, but there are aspects of yourself that you have not yet fully delved into. Some different perspectives of yourself that can serve you far better than they are currently doing so. The Hanged Man speaks to being yourself to the fullest, and a person is infinitely complex. There's an infinite amount of ways to go about expressing yourself as yourself. that are not disingenuous, maybe to this point have seemed not your bag or not your avenue that seems comfortable. Being a person isn't comfortable. Honestly, being a creative, more often than not, is not a hugely comfortable act.
No.
There's nothing more at home, but also so uncomfortable than being yourself to the nth degree and exploring what that means even in its darkest points. And coming to terms with how one lives their life and how one expresses their life through all aspects of who they are. So, Justice is your groundhog card or your shadow card. I keep calling it groundhog because of one episode we did.
The shadow is just the overarching tone of the reading. So I would actually kind of like to read this as a past, present, and future.
I think it
I know
could
that's
easily
not
be
your
seen as a
style,
past,
but
present, future.
it's
It could
kinda how it
very
feels.
easily be seen as such. But I think as a whole, it does speak to that grander notion. And maybe we can get...
So the shadow is more like, what's the vibe?
Yeah. The shadow is... Realistically, you could just have the shadow card and get the essence of this reading, in theory. So here's what the book has on the divinatory use of justice. There's a lot to be said of justice, and if you wish to learn more, there are many resources about the major arcana, because much can be said, because that's the origins of tarot, realistically. In tarot readings, one should always pay very careful attention to the card of justice. Its appearance indicates, first of all, that events have worked out in a way that they were meant to work out. That is, what is happening to you comes from situations and decisions in the past. You have what you deserve. Secondly, it indicates a need and a possibility for seeing the truth of this outcome. The card signifies absolute honesty. At the same time, it shows the possibility that your actions in the future can be changed by a lesson learned in the present situation. We cannot become honest with ourselves without extending that honesty to our dealings with other people. In this sense, the card carries the obvious meanings of justice, honesty, fairness, correct actions, and of course, in legal and other matters, a just decision, though not necessarily a decision a person might prefer. Given how we've already gone through your past, present, future cards, your 3-card reading, it's more or less the same, as a shadow reading often is. Focus on how your art interacts with other people, how other people are seeing your art. You were talking earlier about inviting artists in to see your work and inviting that opinion and inviting that, I almost said ire, but that's realistically worse than scrutiny. Invite the ire of your fellow artists. But there's an aspect of how you break out of your stagnation can often come to greater effect in having it exist with more people, having its effect be not studied, but experienced by others in a way that can make you understand your perspective on yourself better. Like we've talked about in just like art school, how a critique, just sitting in a room with other people seeing your work, can often just change how you see your work. You can sit there with this hugely deep piece and all someone sees is a fucking bear, as you said. And it makes you wonder how you can better express yourself so that it can be taken in by someone else, and how it cannot just be affirming to you, but can then be reached to another person. And as I said earlier, for a moment, be that person's friend, be that person's artistic companion for the moment. You can only really know how those things translate and how you can better articulate yourself by knowing how it is articulated to other people. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be what other people see in you, but it's good to know how your portrayal of yourself comes across and if it's honest to other people. A signifier card might fly, which is the Knight of Pentacles. The signifier, I usually see it as a means of not removing myself from the reading, but knowing better where my perspective comes from as the reader. But I think it's worth adding what the Knight of Pentacles means, and then we can see where that sits. Sometimes the Knight reversed can mean an awakening of those other awarenesses. More often, it shows a failure or exaggeration of the Knight's more obvious virtues. His steadiness slows down to the point of inertia. His plodding responsibility gives way to idleness. A mild personality taken just a little too far becomes weak and depressed, especially if this placidity has covered a repressed desire for either adventure or greater advancement.
on the cusp of adventure and advancement yourself, that this may be...
Yeah, so this is definitely speaking to me, for sure. The Knight of Pentacles reverse can sometimes indicate a crisis. If a person has dedicated her or his life to a job or some similar outer responsibility, and that meaning is taken away, say through dismissal or retirement, then discouragement and depression can overcome him or her. Another example would be a woman who has dedicated her life to her children and now finds that they have grown up away from her. Though such extreme meanings, of course, occur rarely in actual readings, they remain implied in the knight's basic paradox, deeply grounded in, yet unaware of, the magic beneath him. He identifies himself with his functions. He needs to discover the real sources of his strengths within himself and in life. Don't come after me.
Hands!
Don't come after me.
So many hands! No, but these are good hands. I think
These are good hands.
That's a good hand.
So this is referring to, you're not familiar with this deck. I call this deck my bitch deck because it's a bitch to me. It likes to backhand me when it gives me criticism.
I think it does it to everyone.
It does it to everyone.
Yeah, it's a
But
bitch tech to everybody.
I do have a lot of parts of my creativity that I've been putting off for a while because it's been said that it's not responsible to take these big risks in chipping further away at my own creativity. So I think this reading can also apply to me in a lot of ways as well. But to remove that, to remove the hands that were thrown against me, I think what this can mean for your future is that you are going to be coming into different dimensions of yourself that you may have felt were fully fleshed out in the past. These dimensions are likely going to come from new people coming into your life or people that already exist in your life that will be adding further creative or artistic value to your existence than they previously had, or perhaps that you've kept at some arm's length because you didn't feel like that was a dimension that needed to be explored at the moment. All in all, this is a very positive reading into becoming just more of yourself, becoming a more honest and more understood version of yourself. That's not to say you don't understand yourself now, but people evolve day to day. I could walk outside my apartment and have an experience that changes the rest of my life. I took one flight 2 years ago and it gave me COVID, and since then my brain has not worked the same. Shit changes your life in the most mundane ways. Understanding yourself is a day-to-day process. And every day there is a chance to learn more about yourself and more ways to express yourself. The block you're currently chipping away at that can make you feel stagnated just means maybe that's all that dimension had. Start to look around and see what other dimensions you haven't touched in a while, and see what happens when you poke at them. I cannot tell you the hardships that will come from it because there will be them, but I can't tell you what they'll be. All I can say is that you need to begin looking at what dimensions have not been explored as of late.
Very interesting. Well, thank you for these interpretations. You sound like you know what. Like I like the way you interpret these with so much meaning. And I will have to listen to this again once the podcast comes out.
I do that too.
And take some notes.
Do you actually listen to the readings
I go
over
back
again
to
afterwards?
listen to it, I'm like, okay, what's that mean?
Yeah.
You're the watch time during the reading.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to take some clues and cues from this reading. Thank
I
you.
like to challenge Cole, if I may.
Oh God, are you going to throw hands at me now?
No, I'm going to throw nice hands at you. It's nice hands.
Nice
Good
hands.
Good
Very
hands.
soft.
So nice. I have a lot more faith in your sort of intuition when it comes to these things than I think you sometimes do.
Oh, that we're talking about like artists are their biggest critique. I'm just my biggest critique in day-to-day life.
You have a great brain.
It's there.
You have a great brain. It thinks so many thoughts.
Is that a good thing?
It's great. It's working. It's doing its job really well.
It's doing something.
Okay. So you could intellectualize the shit out of anything. I could give you a grain of sand. It could be fantastic. It would be pages long.
Oh, absolutely. We should just do a podcast episode about that. That's just divisive art critique.
So my challenge to you.
Oh, God.
I need you to give me 3 sentences maximum. Don't be generous with the commas.
Can I just give you one?
And it has to be 1 sentence for each stage. So like if we're describing this as a past, present, and future reading, what's the past, present, and future in 1 sentence? If you were to just intuitively say what the reading is about.
Can I use at the very least like long hyphens and semicolons?
No. Well,
Please?
1 comma
1 comma.
per sentence.
No, can I get one? Can I get one long hyphen? One end dash.
Fine.
So for your 9 of Swords, The statue has been chiseled. Long-stop, period.
I like that.
The 10 of Pentacles reversed. You will not return the same, and that's okay. The Hanged Man, you are as much of yourself as you will be tomorrow if you do not experience yourself.
Ooh.
I don't know where that comes from.
I like that.
In essence, if you like making a snowman, you have to roll the snowball for it to grow. If you're not rolling the snowball, the ball will not grow, and you will not be able to place more balls on top to make a man.
You're cheating, but I like it.
Okay, shut up. And justice being just like, yeah, no matter what, you are you. You have a very strong sense of self, but that sense of self can always grow.
I like that.
And the Knight of Pentacles is, for me, just like, stop doubting yourself. Do it. It's actually just do it.
Good hands.
Yeah, good hands.
Good hands.
No, this was wonderful. Like
I'm glad.
There are so many words from which you could derive meaning that you said, and there's a lot to unpack, I would say.
Yeah. At the end of the day, even if you don't believe in the spiritual aspects of tarot, and I'm sure you've heard this if you listen to the podcast, if you remove all spiritual aspects, if you remove guidance, if you remove divination from it,
Boring.
It's boring if you see tarot that way. There's so much there to dig into. In getting this reading and in getting these words, there's immediately experiences that you think of that you would not have thought about any deeper if they had not been confronted to you in whatever verbiage they have been.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain is now going off on its own internal tangent in order to chip away at a new block, in order to expand further in any direction that you might not have considered as of late. Have faith that you are taking those directions as a form of self. I can give you as much instruction from this book as I want, but realistically, you're going to take it in your own stride. Trust that stride.
Right. Sounds good. I will re-listen to this and take some notes.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this episode 3 of season 2 of Practically Happy, the podcast with Racer and Rhodes. Maria.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You can check out Maria's work at...
you can see it on my website at mariadimanshtein.com.
You'll be linked below.
And my Instagram, which is maria.dimanshtein.
Also linked below.
Womp womp.
Do we just end it with that?
Big soap.
Big soap!
Thank you.
You need to start saying this is a Faraday cage production in the fucking podcast.